thank you again, everybody, for taking some time of your day to spend with us on this very fine Thursday evening. And so, to formally start, hello and good evening, fellow UXers. This officially marks the third day of our week-long UX&Chill initiative. We are so excited for you guys to be part of this journey with us, and we can't wait for you guys to see the activities we have in store for you today. Before we jump off to the exciting stuff, my name is Angela from BS Management Engineering, and I'm so hyped to be your host for today's UX and Chill as I take you through the fun and insightful activities we have planned for you this evening. So what are you waiting for? Let's start off with a very exciting raffle. Our co-presenter, UX Philippines, is a local nonprofit organization that hosts the largest and exciting network of design professionals, enthusiasts, and the like in our country. They will be needing your help to answer their survey, so come join us and be part of the hopeful lucky winners. If you want to win a chance to get a Figma Pro 3-month license or a discount for IDF courses, feel free to do so and click the link in our chat box down below or scan the QR code seen in the screen right now. I'll give you guys a few minutes to answer the survey. I'm sure this the prizes that you guys can win are gonna be really very helpful, and it's really gonna be full of learnings if you guys win it. So what are you waiting for? Just scan the QR code or go check out the link in the chat box down below. Okay. I hope you guys are able to answer the survey because UX Philippines prizes are super exciting and definitely worth winning. To formally start off our event, we would like to welcome everybody to this year's UX and Chill production, where you get to revel in your creativity and unleash your inner artist, because not even the pandemic can extinguish our passion for user experience. We are now on our third day of the event, but don't worry, we will still continue to have a bunch of exciting talks and workshops for you to engage with from design and business professionals in the industry to showcase how user experience design can empower users in the face of the digital normal. I can already tell that you guys are very eager to learn and get a closer look into our activities for today. So let's dive in as I introduce to you our very first speaker for this evening. Should you guys have any questions throughout the talk, please do not hesitate to ask questions through our Slido. You may access it through the QR flashed on the screen, or you may also click the link in the chat box down below. So our guest for today's talk regarding the handover ceremony is the Chief Creative at Frost Design. He is an entrepreneur, digital practitioner for more than 14 years, an industry speaker and writer, and a father of 5. He led various creative projects from top local and global organizations like International Organization on Migration, Globe Telecoms, Aboitiz His Land, and TV5. Without further ado, let us now welcome Mr. JP de Guzman. Hi, sir.
Hi. Hi. Sorry. Good evening.
Good
Wait.
evening, sir.
Hi.
You
Can
may
you hear
now
me
take the
now?
floor.
You can hear me clearly?
Yes. Yes, po, sir.
Okay. Okay, cool. Give me a sec. I'll be sharing my
Again, as Sir JP de Guzman shares his screen, please remember that if you have any questions throughout the talk, you may go to the you can scan the QR code flashed on the screen, or go to the Slido website and enter the event code 8181
Okay. Can you see my screen now?
Yes po, sir.
Okay, this the slide one, right? Okay,
Yes po.
came. Okay.
Take
So,
the first.
good evening, guys. First and foremost, thank you for inviting me to talk to your event. Uh, this is really refreshing for organizations like you to have this kind of opportunities for discussion pertaining to this particular field of practice. Uh, but my talk is really all about the handover ceremony. Uh, Not to frighten anyone. It's really just what happens when you just send that link, your design to any developer, and what happens once they start developing it. And what really goes into this process is a complex one, but I don't need uh, to dive deep into each of the parts, but give you an overview of how we solve it from an organizational standpoint. And if you learn anything out of this, I hope it's having that perspective that design, once interpreted, have its own struggles before you can see it in the light of day. So for those who want to know who I'm JP de Guzman. I'm the Chief Creative of Frost Design. I've been in the industry for quite some time. I started my design career when I was 16 years old. And then I started my business after graduating in college and operated the Frost for quite some time already. So for those who don't know who is Frost Design, well, we are an interaction design agency. We've been here for almost 14 years. We've worked with large companies here and abroad, and these are some of the notable clients. But what we really do is we design anything that appears on the screen, but we zero in on speed and quality. Now, most of the time you would say focus on quality, and then once you put speed into the equation, sometimes quality is compromised. One of the mandate that we have as an organization is to make sure that we deliver not one, not two, both of them has to be good and fast. Now, in order for us to do that, as an organization, we are run mainly by processes and practices. These are these are the pillars of how we operate Frost. In Internally, we always say we love to science the shit out of things. It is from the Martian, the movie. We love to look at design not just in the context of being aesthetically beautiful, but how does design function in our organization, and how do we deliver the work the way we want it to be. As simple as it is, you can just say, well, you can just crank out screen, but the challenge there is how do you produce screens that's both good, on time, and never compromise on the quality. That's a bit of a challenge. Now, just to dive deep into our topic, maybe you have a design that you've created, and then you submit it for development. Let me give you a clear example. This is one of the website that we've done for a game design development company in the Philippines. So this was the mock-up that we've created. Now, as soon as we send it to the devs, it looks totally different. You might not see the details, but there are lots of things there that needs to be fixed. If you want to put some visual annotations, number one, the size and the alignment of the logo needs to be fixed. The size of the text of the banner of the blurb of the text needs to be adjusted and then realign. And then finally, the width of the scroll markers needs to be adjusted. Now, these are really minor things. And to be honest, they are. But the challenge there is these minor things do compound a lot until they become death. As the image say, hey, those are just minor issues, right? We can fix that. But when you're faced with this kind of situation, things start to get ugly. Normally, we do patches, we do, quick fix just to stop the bleeding. And this is the challenge for most of any design endeavor that necessitates development. In a multi-team structure, the more you add people into the mix, the more challenging it gets. And in our situation, we experience what we call the gap. Now, these kind of situation is easy if you're just the one designing and developing all at the same time. But the circumstances of how things are done change when you start adding people. Well, in any design endeavor, people is the one that makes things more complicated. And as a professional, we've identified 4 key things that affects and widens this gap. Number 1, you have what we call fragmented practice. Number 2, people tend to interpret design differently. Number 3, there will always be a lot of inconsistencies. Number 4, most of the time and most often than not, your design will go out of sync. These are the common challenges that we get to face every time that we work on any design project. These are inevitable. And in fact, these are the facts of the practice. Now, what we can do is just to mitigate the risk and be efficient in handling these kind of situation. Now, if I'm going to illustrate how we design at Frost, you can look at our pipeline. When I say pipeline, it's just a snapshot of how we work and the flow of work that goes from one step to another. So from a design, we do componentize, then we have a normalization process, then we annotate. That's the only time that we can transfer the design to the developer. Then the developer gets to build it, they assemble, they wire, and test. Now, it looks linear in many ways, but in reality, this is far more complex than that. But I'm not going to focus on our pipeline, but I just want to highlight that each step of the pipeline addresses the key challenges in doing design handovers. So let's dive into the first item. Number 1, fragmented development practice. The way to solve fragmented development practice is to have a single and shared understanding of how you look at things. In your case, if you're just a student, you're going to come out inexperienced. And that's a challenge because when you join a company, that company will have some idea of how things should be done, how things should be implemented, and how things are designed and developed. Now, well, if you're a professional, having a common understanding between the designer and the developer is key to address fragmented development practice. For Frost, we design and develop what we call nomenclatures, concepts and terms that we share across the organization. When we say apple, it's apple. It's not green, it's red. We have to be very precise about the definition of the words that we say so that we have a common understanding about the things that we want to achieve. A case for this one is how we name our components. You can look at Brad Frost's atomic design. It's inspired. It's an inspiration from that. I took it from there. So we call elements as those labels, fields, and buttons. And then when you combine those elements, we call them low-level components. And then when you combine one or more low-level components, we call them high-level components. We have to name this and illustrate it as is so that people can understand what the hell we're talking about. But more than that, it helps us to create a more streamlined development process. Because when you look at the way we develop components, it's something like this. You can imagine something like a factory floor, like you're assembling an iPhone or a machine. It goes into a process. We do the same. As rigid as it is, it's very disciplined. It's very precise in the way we look at things. And to cap it off, we have a naming convention, which is nomen, right? Nomen defines a lot of things on how we define elements in our design. So this is from an old document. So for example, when we name containers, we are very specific what part of that container is all about. There are characteristics, there are parameters, and there are properties that we need to define in order for us not to use repeating names with regards to our design. Another one is how do we name text, the labels, and those elements that appears on the page. We don't invent this kind of things. We use reference in order for us to know what's the right term for each one. This is the reason why we can assure that when we design and we develop, we use the same words. Now, to up the ante, we have a way to name our objects. This is a way that we put names so that we don't just say container or we don't just say group. We have to be very, very precise. This is the key to understanding how to communicate with developers and designers with a single model in mind. Now, in the larger scheme of things, we do this in our development practice. Our model, we use atomic design. The way we write it, we use RSCSS. It's the syntax that one of my friend Rico Santa Cruz created. And then at the center of it, we have what we call CSS writing principle. It's a set of rules and body of practices that underlines how we code a particular thing. Now, that's on the coding side. But we also have to make sure that we apply it on the design side. Our Figma, now we are applying this, what we call a box model logical grouping. So when you look at our layers, it has to correspond to how box model, for those who don't know, how browsers interpret or position elements in a specific container. It has to be this defined so that we can move on through the process of automation. When you're working with a team and you want to address what we call fragmented development practices, right? You need to define this set of rules. Number two, interpreting your design. The challenge for most developers is that they can see some of the details that designers created. Sometimes they are not sensitive enough for them to spot the right padding, margin, font size, and the likes. For designers, detail is crucial. That's why we don't want our developers to interpret our design based on their own understanding. I know this is kind of controversial for those who design and develop, but in a multi-team situation, we have to be very, very explicit. One way to do that, when we lay out our flows, we follow what we call our own creation. We call this a train track methods that illustrate how one page or one screen flows from one screen to another. It gives us the happy path, the flow diversion, and deviation, and the state that each of the screen needs to have. It's our map of how the application or website that we're building should look like. It's explicit. It's our guide so that our developers, when they interpret or when our project managers discuss this to other designers or product owners for our client, they can clearly understand what's going on. And this practice, we've managed to scale to almost 1,200 screens with this kind of thing. And for us, it's easier to grasp. Number two, designers are the ones responsible to name the components. I know this is hard for some, but we don't want our developers to invent names because sometimes they go out of context. Because of the narrow view of the approach, sometimes designers have the bigger picture. And even though in cases that the developer have seen the bigger picture, once you start developing, you zero in on details. And that's a problem. So the responsibility of our designers is to clearly name each of the part once they start to do these process. This is just an example of a website in the breakdown of those sections of the site following nomen. Another one. This is common to handovers. We call them redlining and annotations. We're very, very specific about a lot of things. If there's anything we're so sensitive about spacing, font size, line height, the things that are invisible to most developers. So we have to define each and every one. In the part of the process, this is the most laborious you can ever think of. We spend so much time doing this. Just to give you an idea, three resources will work on this simultaneously to hash this out. In a bigger project, that's usually the case. Why do we even have to go through this process? Because we want to make sure that when our designs are interpreted or are converted and executed by our developers, they are going to follow our design to a T. So we have to define the font size, how big, what's the base font, what's the font family, is it heavy, is it medium, the letter spacing, every single detail. That's how we can ensure that they are executing our designs and not interpreting them based on what they think the design should be. Next, inconsistencies. When you design big projects, inconsistencies is part of the work. It's a fact of life. If you have 5 designers working on a mobile app, that's a given. Sometimes when a new designer comes into play with different style and flavor, even if you have design systems in place, I know a lot of people would say, well, if you have a design system that should solve the problem, I beg to differ. Most of the time, inconsistencies plague this kind of things. How do we handle this kind of things? How do we solve this? Well, part of our process is we have what we call componentization and normalization. I don't know for some computer science or people who's taking DBMS. Normalization is when you normalize your database. And when you do componentization, it's just breaking out the design into smaller parts. It's technically the same, but we have to take it to a whole new level. For componentization, you can, I think you've seen this a lot, breakdowns of the buttons, states, widgets, etc. These are the things that you can see on, you know, inspiration websites. But let me tell you a fact that these are not glamorous in any way. These are laborious work that we have to crank out every single time. You can, I mean, a lot of people would say, well, our design system looks good, but the process of coming up to this level takes a lot of time. And we only componentize and even think about design system once we've fleshed out everything. We don't design our design system if we haven't seen all the possibilities that's necessary to create the design system in this case is an afterthought to systematize the decisions that you've made early on. But we have to take this a bit higher. Now, the one that's killing us really is the process of style normalization. So imagine when you have 5 designers, they're going to pick 5 different font size, somehow similar, but those font size might work on certain contexts, but some won't. And when you put a lot of them to the mix, and when developers develop them, it's going to be a nightmare. Style normalization for us involves cleaning up the spaces, cleaning up the font size, cleaning up the paddings, the numbers that needs to be there, the colors. Every little detail needs to be normalized so that we can reduce the variance that we put in our design. So in this case, you have variant A, B, and C, and then the final normalization value will be something like that. Now, that's a boring part of work. You have to do it. Now, in extreme cases, we apply some sort of statistic model. We do math in the way we do things like this. What you can see that each of the dots represents, here are the screens of a mobile app. Each single dot. Now, well, for your age, this is a bit extreme and you don't need to understand what the hell is happening here. But in order for us to understand the complexity of the scale of the application we are designing, we need to understand how big is the variance of each of the elements we're dealing with. So, you know, the closer that they are together, the more similar that they look. And then the farther they are together, the higher the difference that they have. But why do we even have to go to this extreme? Because if you're going to tackle thousands of screens and normalize them efficiently, manual labor doesn't work anymore. Interesting, right? Next. Now, we are already in a phase of our production process that our tools needed to be extended. That's why we create our own Figma plugins. This is one of the Figma plugins that we have, that we are starting to develop. This is part of our design engineering efforts. because we found that a lot of the work that we do, the laborious part that's important in producing quality work, necessitates some sort of automation. And in order for us to win this whole game, we need a bit of help. That's why we are starting to create plugins, custom tools on top of our tool chain so that we can efficiently design with speed in mind. Right? You have here normalized spacing, resize to fill. These are typical things that we do so that when we check our spacing, uh, apply it goes into the standards of what spacing should we have. That's one. Next, our design and development are somehow connected to one another. Remember the nomen that I showed you. When we design things, it's like a factory. Sometimes some developers doesn't see the page. Most of the time they can only see the components. And then when we develop things like this is what we call our design system that is compiled every time we develop a lot of things. And these are all automated in our process, part of our workflow. And then at the end, once we are done with all the components, we can just copy and paste it and build templates out of it. That's how we design efficiency and speed in mind. That all of these are not fragmented. They need to be integrated and be thoughtfully addressed from each and every step. Next, uh, out of sync artifacts. This is typical. If most of our design will go out of sync. To be honest, it's one of the hardest thing to synchronize. And teams spends a lot of time, other teams, international products, digital products spends a lot of time to address this specific area of problem. Now, you know, to be honest, we are still far from this because the only way for you to do this is to have a single source of truth. But this is easier said than done. The challenge of having a single source of truth is that the tools that you use and the processes that you have in place in the organization should support each and every step, and the output that you produce in each and every step feeds the next step of the chain, and everything needs to go back to that single source of truth. And you can't do this with just design. That's why engineering is a big part of this. This is one of the big challenge of any design organization trying to perfect this problem, having a single source of truth. Because at the time that you develop something, most often than not, even with the process that I've shown you earlier, something will go out of sync. Now, I think you don't need to follow everything that I put there. Or you don't even need to emulate what we have because all the process there is very specific to Frost. If you think that doing handover is, should I say, sexy or fun, I'm going to say it now that it entails a lot of work. Let me give you one key takeaway. The reason why we do all of this, all of those design pipeline that you've seen earlier, the normalization, componentization, you don't even need to do that, to be honest. You just need to get a great developer who can interpret your design well and just get allegiance of them. And I bet you can partly solve the problem, but that's not always the case. At the end of this, it boils down into one simple thing. Handover and all the things that I've shown you is an effort to create an effective team communication. Regardless the approach, regardless the methodologies, regardless the fancy things that I've shown you, the whole dots and all, forget about that. Handovers, the ceremony that bridge design and development, and the artifacts that you produce out of it espouses effective team communication. Because at the end, and I'm going to close this, our role, my role, is to always bridge that gap. Now let me console you that we haven't cracked this thing 100%. To be honest, you know, there are lots of things that we can improve in our process. But the most important part here, and I want you to learn, is that when you talk to someone, a developer, and you're a designer, establishing the rules, a process of having a clear understanding is a way to bridge the gap. Now, the more people you add into the mix gets things more complicated, so you need more process involved. But never forget that your goal is to bridge the gap. Whatever approach that you pick after these talk, I hope you learn something out of this, is to facilitate clear and conscious team communication. And with that, I really hope that you learned something. And I want to close my talk to say thank you. And I'm going to entertain any question. And I know some of you would ask a lot of questions. And whatever it is, thank you very much. You can follow me in my company, fb.com/Frost Design Group. Frost Design Group is our website. Yes, we are hiring. If you want to find career into interaction design, we have openings. Thank you very much. Thank you for UX&Chill. Thank you for listening. There you go.
Thank you so much for that wonderful talk, Mr. JP de Guzman. It was so insightful to see how Frost creates their effective handover ceremony. It was great to hear about the importance of defining everything to the smallest of details so that everyone in the team has the same idea and every design is interpreted to follow what the designers want so that there will be no inconsistencies and there would just be a very effective team communication. It was amazing to hear about how your company is able to bridge the gap between designers and developers. And I hope our participants also were able to take away a lot from your talk.
I hope
I
so.
am pretty sure they are excited to learn even more about the handover ceremony. And so now we will be opening the floor for questions from the talk. So please do not hesitate again to ask some questions through our Slido. And you may access it through the QR code flashed in the slide, or you may click the link in the chat box. Okay. So for our
Sabi daw, serious daw ako. Guys, hindi talaga ako serious. It's just the way I structure the talk.
That's an amazing talk, sir. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
For your first question, it is: have you ever had a disagreement with a developer regarding your design or the handover itself? If so, how do you address it?
Yeah. Well, disagreement, definitely. Uh, and you can never always, the developers will not always say yes. And sometimes they have certain solutions that address certain key problems at a more efficient manner. And in that regard, in a case of disagreement, we always go back to the design. And then from there, we say, I think this is the right way to do it. And then we need to adjust it that way. And most often than not, there's certain solutions that developers find it better rather than the designers. So it's more on the discussion about what's the right approach and what's the right you know method to use. And just to be honest, designers never always get it right. That, that's one of the things that we've learned. And having clear boundaries between who should have a say to certain things is key. But because Frost is very design driven, design centric, sometimes we are so bullish that designers drive the conversation. Our developers will find it sometimes annoying, but that's really part of our culture. But we're trying to uh, be more collaborative on that particular area. But yeah, disagreements are typically common.
Thank you so much for that, Sir JP. So for our
Yep.
second question, can you share some tips on how to conduct better handovers in this
Work
WFH?
from home.
Yes, po.
Okay, great. Uh, well, for us now, before pre-pandemic, I never really subscribed to the work from home setup. That's really our approach, because we are very our cohesion needs to be we are so people need to be in the same place to collaboratively work. Now, because of the pandemic, we are forced to go home. Uh, there are key challenges there. Number one is, did you know that the train track method was born out of the pandemic? That's number one. It's because we need to communicate the flow to the our client. In order for us to do that, it's part of our master file. We need to find a method to communicate that. So train track was born out of the pandemic. Number two, most of our design handover ceremonies are born out of the pandemic. The things that you see here, the one that I illustrated earlier, are part of our approach to solve this particular communication challenges. Except the componentization and normalization, we've been doing that for quite some time, because we need to address huge websites or applications that demands level of consistency, and no single developer nor designer can typically handle that. So a system needs to be in place. uh, we are using Figma most of the time. I think it's good that we have that collaboration, but on top of that, really, it's the mechanics of how you do this kind of things that really push it forward, rather than the tool that we have at our disposal. It's the process and the mechanics rather than the tool. So any tips? You start from what need to be communicated to your developer. What's the most essential part here? Are you very focused on the fonts? Are you very focused on the spacing? Are you very focused on the interaction? Start from there. It doesn't really, you don't need to have that glamorous, uh, you don't even need to copy ours. You just need to understand what's the most important thing that you need to communicate in your design, that your developer needs to understand on the get-go. That's the only thing that I can say, because we started answering that same question from the start.
Thank you so much for that, sir. Our next question is: was there a time when it was difficult to understand why a certain design can't be implemented given very technical constraints? And if so, how do you address it?
Was there a time when it was difficult to understand why certain? Ah, okay. Hmm. Um, this goes back to the engineering culture that you have, or how the developers look at the problem. And I'm going to be honest that not all engineering team who implement, not all developer are solutions oriented. And I'm going to be very frank about that. Sometimes they will always say, mahirap yan eh. Parang imposible yan. Right? Or, sasabit tayo dyan. That's really normally the start. It's one is the culture. If the culture is stuck into that, we just develop what's easy. This is going to be a common problem. Not all design can be implemented. We need to simplify that because you're going to eat up a lot of development time. And our developer can't handle that. Sure, that's one. Number two, you can also look at it from a cost constraint. Let's say, for me, any design can be developed, to be honest. It's just take amount just right amount of time. But the thing there is the amount of time you're willing to spend to get that developed. And when you put time into the equation, you put cost into the equation. And then when you put cost, there are business implications, there are things a lot more complex in the mix. That's why when a product manager or when a business decision comes in play, we don't only look at the capability of the engineering team. We don't only look at the capability of the designer or how innovative the design is, but we have to look at all the facet that goes into the decision, whether it's cost, whether it's time, availability of resources, the capability of the technology, the span of the technology of how it's going to be developed. Those key things play into the mix. So, designers, don't be so sad when your design can be developed, or don't call out your developer and say, ang hina naman ng development team namin, gusto lang nila yung madali. No, guys. There's a lot in play there. And as a designer who's doing this for a very long time, I tell you, uh, looking at our screen is only a speckle of dust into the grand scheme of things on the things that we do that affects the business that we designed for. So I hope I answered that question uh, clearly.
Thank you so much for that, sir. I totally agree with you. Our next question is, what is your flow in conducting handovers? What's the first thing you discuss with the developer?
Okay. Let me think. Mm, Number one, well, I can. You start with the brief. This is the design. This is what it needs to look. This is what will happen, and this is how things should look like. Now, the next step there is you let the developer absorb those information. I tell you, you can never do this in one sitting. If you're dealing with a huge app, this is going to be a challenge. So that's the first session, a briefing. And then the next is you go down and discuss the components. Now in a multi-team setup, what we do is we distribute the components into component sheets that the developer gets to work on. Sometimes they never get to see the actual product. Imagine that. Sometimes all they see are just bunch of buttons, labels, headlines, and all. That's what they're going to see. And the only chance that they get to see the final product is at the end of the process. We do that so that we can compartmentalize what needs to be addressed and what can be executed by the developer at a very given time. It makes things more efficient, manageable, so we can also calculate how fast we can finish the entire thing. And then senior developers will see how all the components are wired, how everything works together. So it depends on your level. It depends on what exposure you get to the project. But we never shared an entire link to the developer and say, there you go, develop it. We don't. that's a recipe for disaster, because most of the time it's hard for them to absorb hundreds or even less than 100 screens at a time. You need to digest it. So a way for that is to chop it up so that they can get piece of the work and then build from there. So we orchestrate a lot of these things from the back, and some of these are transparent to our team. So yeah, for those who want, this is part of what we call design operations, and it's a branch of practice for designers and design managers. There.
Unfortunately, we only have time for one question.
Okay.
So, are you open to questions being messaged to you?
Yes, I do answer them.
All right. Okay, so for our last question, first they'd like to thank you for our very nice presentation.
Thank
Their
you.
question is, what happens when tight timelines are introduced into the project? Are there changes to how you go about the laborious handover?
Okay. That's a very good question. Sino nagtanong nun? That's a very good question. Uh, if we are going to be true to our word of being time focused and quality focused, one of the pain of doing this in doing shortcut is the penalty that we get at the end. There's always a penalty. We always have to pay for it. That's why those minor things, when it piles up, it becomes what we call design and technical debt. At the end, that's going to cost us a lot. Actually, it costs us a lot. So, do we have a shortcut to this? What we've learned is we never should have taken any shortcut. Never. And that's a definitive word. So, how do you maintain the quality without shortcuts? This is where process automation comes in. That's why we are investing our time in design engineering, so that it doesn't really matter how laborious the process is. It's that we want our code, our plugins in Figma to do the heavy lifting, so that the only thing that remains is design. That's the only way for us to do this precisely the way we want it. And that's why we are investing a lot of time refining our process, refining our approach, so that we can get to a point that we can have a Figma file, click on a component, normalize, componentize, everything runs in a smooth process. And at the end, we click on export. It goes through the pipeline of our development. Everything seamless. Everything works like magic.
Yeah, that's
That's
it.
the goal.
Thank you so much, sir. And unfortunately, we do not have time to answer all of the other questions, but sir is taking messages. So, sir, would you rather they message you through the Frost Design Group Facebook page?
Yeah, sure. Yes, yes.
Yes.
They can post a comment there.
Messages. So, if you guys wanna know the answers to your questions, feel free to message. So again, thank you for that wonderful talk,
Thank
Mr.
you.
JP de
I
Guzman.
hope you learn. I hope you learn, and I hope you're inspired. I'm not here to give you a detailed talk, but more of inspired you to think differently in this kind of things. Right.
We hope you had a fun time with Sir JP de Guzman's
Thank you
talk
very
about
much.
the handover ceremony. We hope you were able to learn a lot about the design development turnovers. With this, UX Society would like to award the certificate of appreciation to Mr. JP de Guzman, which states this certificate is awarded to Mr. JP de Guzman in gratitude for speaking at this year's UX&Chill 2020. Experience Digital with the topic, the Handover Ceremony, given on this third day of December 2020. Again, thank you so much, Mr. J. for your enriching workshop. And thank you everyone for coming. Before we end this segment of today's festivities, let us first take a photo together. We highly encourage all of you guys to open your cameras for our group photo. Yay, everybody. If you can open your cam, we would highly encourage you. So, we may have a group photo with our speaker. Okay, so I think let's just wait for a few seconds so other people have time to open their cameras if they would like to do so. Okay, so I think that is all. We currently have two pages, so I think Nathan will take the photo. Nathan, will you be able to count for us? All right.
Okay, guys. 1, 2, 3, smile. Thank you.
Okay, again, thank you so much, sir, Mr.
Thank you.
for your workshop.
Thank you very much. Bye.
Okay, everybody. We have just finished our first talk for tonight. We've just finished our first talk for tonight, and we will be um, having a short break until 7:45. Um, so again, we while we are taking a short break before our next activity, we would like you guys to answer the evaluation form for today's event through the link in the chat box or the QR code flashed on the slide. It would really be great to hear your feedback as we want to make sure that all of you enjoy our events and future initiatives. So yes, we love the feedback loop. And just to remind you guys, our co-host UX Philippines is giving away freebies to lucky winners. So if you guys want to win some exciting and useful prizes, simply answer the survey by scanning the QR code on the screen or click the link that will be sent through the Zoom chat box. Okay, so we'll see you guys later at 7:45 p.m. for a talk about the practical side of innovation, the untold history of Paymaya, to be given by a special guest from Paymaya. Are you guys excited? Because I surely am, and I hope you guys are all too. So again, we'll be having a short break from talks until then. So you guys may take some few minutes to answer the survey from UXPH. Drink some water, get some snacks, or go on a bathroom break because our next speaker is surely one that you